everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of This Woman Can. Now, I'm really excited. I'm always excited to talk to my next guest, but we were introduced by a mutual acquaintance who thought we'd have great synergies. And we've spoken before, and yeah, we have. So my guest this week is Ronke Kokoruwe, and I'm hoping I got that right, Ronke. Yeah, because I've been practicing here. Now, Ronke trained as a barrister, then qualified as solicitor after obtaining a Master's in International Environmental Law from the London School of Economics. She's also a certified executive coach, a trainer, a speaker, and the founder of iVerbalize, a public speaking communications training coaching business. So I'm always interested in hearing about that change, and because that's quite a vast change. However, she's on a mission to champion women to step up in their leadership capabilities and to take steps to shift from spectator to speaker, expressing themselves from a place of intention and with greater courage and clarity. Not only that, she also mentors young women in the developing world to become future leaders. So we do have a little bit in common, Ronke.
Oh,
and welcome to This Woman Can.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Fantastic. And yes, you do hear a bit of an English accent, so that's another connection we have. So a little bit of English. So Ronke, tell us a little bit about your career journey and how you got to where you are today with iVerbalize.
Wow, where to begin, Janice? I suppose. So for as long as I could remember, I was going to be a lawyer, right? Yeah. That was what the plan was. I would walk about in my mum's wig and gown as a child because both my parents were lawyers.
Wow.
And I grew up in Nigeria with them. And so the vision, the plan, the hope was for Ronke to be a lawyer and to be a lawyer for life. So I came over to the UK from Nigeria and embarked on my legal journey. Did that for a number of years, as you mentioned, went to the bar, qualified as a solicitor, and did that for a number of years, probably about 15, going back and forth in between starting my own family. And I suppose a number of years ago, Janice, I started to think about the future. I was turning 40, and it was around that time I started to wonder what I wanted my future life to look like.
Yes. Yeah.
And less I saw the law take space in that future vision. And I suppose I just got to a point where I had started to feel quite bored. No offense to any lawyers listening.
Yeah.
But genuinely started to feel somewhat suffocated and stifled by all the different things I wanted to be doing, thought I might be able to do, and just got to a point where I felt like there was potentially a different path that was calling my name. Yeah. And so
so as you were saying that, a load of questions started popping up in my head as you were saying that. So let me start with the first one. Because one of the things I know a lot with, I see a lot with, especially Black women or of a certain, certain generation, that kind of stuff, is the influence of our parents, whether they're in the industry, whether they're in that particular field of work or not. But it's the case that some usually want more for you, so you will do X, Y, Z. So did you experience that, or did you think there was more of a, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say pressure. Maybe pressure is the word for you to follow in your parents' footsteps.
I suppose anybody who I laugh is from Nigeria. And I know it's not peculiar only to Nigerians, but your parents have this expectation that you go on to become a lawyer, a doctor, an engineer, an architect, or one of those anyway. Yeah. And so because both my parents were lawyers, in fact, they used to laugh that they wanted all of their 6 children to follow in their path. And so when 3 out of 6 of us went on to study law, I mean, I'm like, we've done well, right? We got at least 50%. So was there a sense of pressure from them? I suppose not from them. They didn't say, oh, you must, but subconsciously and in a very subtle way. And I say that because when I started to think about the decision to walk away from the law, I remember feeling quite anxious.
Yeah.
I remember feeling like I needed permission from my parents who had invested so much in my education and had dreams and plans for me, permission from my husband who'd also invested in my journey and had, you know, we had a joint vision at the time of what the future could look like. And ultimately, Janice, I actually realized that I needed permission from myself.
Yes.
And that's what it boiled down to. Permission to explore, permission to try something different, permission to say it's okay to close one door and seek to open another. And that all felt really scary. But essentially, I knew that if I was going to move forward and explore new horizons, that I needed to step away and really explore what that looked like.
Why did you think you had to give yourself permission?
It's a great question. Because for so much of my life, Ronke was defined by a sense of my career taking such a main place in just how I viewed myself, how I introduced myself, how people knew me. And so there was something about giving myself permission that it's okay to not have to show up with that title, so to speak. That it's okay to not have to show up with others looking at me through that lens. And that it's actually okay to try. I mean, I would never, ever have considered myself to be an entrepreneur or a business owner. That just was not in my vision. So there was something about giving myself permission to try, just to try something different and perhaps to fail and survive the failure.
We'll take the learnings from the failure. And you said two things that stuck out for me there, and that I hear a lot when people when women are changing direction like this, is first of all, is that without that particular job, title, career, who am I? And it's for them to understand that it doesn't define who you are. It literally is a job and a title. It's not who you are. And it's detaching yourself from that. And secondly, especially for a profession such as yours as law, you have invested not just finance, but as you said, an inordinate amount of time. You know, your family supported you because, you know, taking the bar and going down the law, that's not an easy route.
Absolutely.
You know, and so I hear a lot of women saying, well, will I not have wasted, and I say that in air quotes, would I not have wasted that time or that, you know, or that experience or that investment I did? So let me ask you a quick question to any woman who may be thinking, well, I want to give myself that permission. I want to make that change, but, you know, I've invested all this. What would you say to them? What's the piece of advice you'd share with them?
The investment is worth it. That is generally the starting point that I would say, because I had to come to a place of appreciating that my law has set such a solid foundation for everything else that I'm doing. I remember attending an event and quite similar situation, a woman who'd been in a very different field and was moving to a completely different space and feeling like she was starting from zero. She really felt like, oh my goodness, I've left the law, I'm moving into this, I have nothing. And I remember the speaker just reminding, reassuring and encouraging her that all those years, those 15 years of whether it's accountancy or law or marketing, whatever it is, you have all of that in your back pocket, in your handbag, and nobody can take that away from you. And what I found for myself personally is that it genuinely has set me up really, really well to do what I'm doing now. Fantastic. It's given me such a strong foundation. And yes, I'm really grateful, actually. I wouldn't change that journey. I know some people would say, would you have wanted to do it different? It's what it is. And I'm really grateful that those years that I invested in the law, time, money, experience, all of that, it's paying its own dividends in a very different way.
Fantastic. And like you say, it's recognizing that we're not starting over, we're starting from experience.
That's right.
You know,
Yes.
and you know, and you can't buy that experience.
No.
Nothing's going to do that for you at all.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
thanks for being so transparent there. I know I asked you a few extra questions. I said I'd dig a little bit deeper. But Ronke, what has been the best thing, you think, when you look back about your mid-career change?
Wow, what has been the best thing? It's funny because I was speaking to somebody earlier today, and I was just marveling at the journey thus so far, and thinking about how one little seed of an idea, from daily, monthly, and a few years of watering, has become something that genuinely I would never have imagined. And so I suppose one of the best bits of this journey is just the fact that I got started, and that I'm still doing this, and that it's enabled me to create a life that is full of joy and adventure. And in spite of the uncertainty, of which there is plenty, that I'm doing work that I absolutely love. And work that has an impact in a way that really fuels me, really gives me a sense of gratitude, a sense of legacy, a sense of so much more possibility. And that's because I made the decision to water that tiny seed of faith, of hope, of possibility, and that it's blossoming into this beautiful tree that continues to grow and grow.
Lovely. Love those analogies. Love those analogies. Now, what you're describing then, I hate to use this very cliched terms, you know, is that people talk about finding your purpose or your passion. And I'm like, I personally always struggle with that, because I'm like, what the hell? How with my purpose, my passion, what does that mean? So, you know, share with us or describe for us how you made that transition, because it's very different. You know, it's a very different, like you say, in from the law to entrepreneurship, and not even in the law field sector per se. So how did you tap into that purpose, that passion, you know, to get where you are?
Sure, yes. I wish I had this beautiful story, this of how one day it all came to me. There's none of that. So much of my journey has been accidental. It started from a place of feeling dissatisfied and wanting more. And pausing, and grateful for my husband, who was very supportive in giving me space to reflect. And I felt like I needed that space to reflect, because I honestly had no idea what I was going to do, what sort of work was calling out to me. A friend of mine who was helping me to consider next steps looked at my CV, and she said, Ronke, your CV is so lawyerly. And I'm like, yes, it is, because that's all I've done. That's all I know. And I genuinely had no real sense of where it was that I was going to step into. And so it did take some failed attempts. I started a Montessori course, because I thought maybe I'll set up a Montessori nursery. We have 3 children, and we'd had some interesting situations with some of their childcare. And so there was a sense of, I want to create this beautiful space where children feel completely safe and looked after. And I started that course, and I thought I would be through it like that, walk in the park. It was all virtual. This was before virtual was a thing, right? And I really struggled. And in the end, I failed one of the modules, and I thought, actually, this isn't quite going according to plan. And so I've packed it up nicely. It's in a bag. All the books are in a bag in the garage. And
you still have them.
Yes. They do tease me from time to time and go, what's in that bag, Mum? What's in that bag? And I'm like, let's just keep walking past. And so there was that. And I went through various just journeys like that, where I was trying to figure out, is this the thing? Is this the thing? And coaching literally fell into my lap. I met up with a wonderful gentleman who was leading at a very senior level in an organization. And over lunch, he very flippantly mentioned that he had a coach. And that stopped me in my own mind's tracks, because I'm like, a coach? And I said to him, I said, but you are so successful. Why on earth do you have a coach? And he said to me, he said, well, that's why I'm so successful.
Yeah.
And he said, in fact, I don't have just the one, I have 2 coaches. So immediately I was like, tell me more. He introduced me to his coach. I attended one of her leadership events, a beautiful, really intimate setting that she organized in London, where leaders were sharing very vulnerably the stories of their own journeys. And immediately I felt really connected to that. And it was in the cloakroom as we were heading off, I bumped into a lady. We had a laugh about my coat, and she became a wonderful friend who then introduced me to another friend of hers who was setting up a coaching business. Literally fell into my lap. I didn't feel like I was looking for it.
Yeah.
On reflection, I was already coaching. I was already in spaces where I was doing this sort of thing, but not knowing.
Yeah.
And so when it came, it felt like a familiar friend who was beckoning me to come in and to experience it more fully. And so coaching and then training and then the speaking, those 3 strands have come together beautifully now in the work that I do.
And I love how you describe that, because quite often we put, when we're going through this mid-career transition, this mid-career change, I'm speaking from experience myself. You put a lot of pressure on yourself. I know when I first transitioned out of the corporate CEO role to working for myself, the level of pressure I placed on myself to get the same sort of results. Till I really had to check myself and say, look, you had a whole bloody team of 80 people. You know, you had a whole organization behind you. Why are you putting that kind of level of stress on yourself? And if that's what you wanted, wouldn't you still be there? So it's really about giving yourself, and I had a few hits and starts. I started out in the leadership coaching because I knew leadership. I'm the eldest of 6. I've always been a leader. You know, and I felt natural that way with me. And I'm like, but I'm not, it doesn't excite me. It doesn't speak to me. It doesn't give me that feeling you get when you know you've hit the nail on the head. And as I've slowly gone through, I've known that I've wanted to work with Black women. That's what I started doing, because I can relate. Then I knew I wanted to work with Black women over 40, because our experiences, we may come from different continents, but our experience in the corporate world are very similar.
Right.
You know, and then especially when you start talking about women over 50, Black and stuff like that, and the challenge we start facing, and how, as you said, we have to really give ourselves that time to look at what next, because we're around here, we're going to be around a lot longer than we ever would have been before. So we need to be in a career that you enjoy. So allowing yourself to just evolve. And I'll put a caveat on this, because sometimes financially it's not always viable, and I understand that. But I think if you take, I always call it a get me by job, or do whatever it is, knowing that this isn't the way you're going to end, that you're working on a bigger plan, I think it makes life easy to go there. So I love the fact that you said, look, you had to just kind of feel it. You know, and that's right, to be doing it for so many years. Anything else is alien.
For sure. Sure. And I think just even listening to you, I think there's something about really believing that something is possible. I think sometimes we don't even give ourselves the opportunity or the permission or the chance to think there could be something that's different. There could be something that's more worthwhile, or we think it and then we think, oh my gosh, but it feels impossible. And I'm learning through my own journey that just that one foot in front of the other, the exploring and failing and discovering, that in itself is such a precious gift.
And I think, just to add on to that, I know we're slightly digressing, but one of the things I also realize is that we don't realize how many hidden skills and talents we have. I would never in a month of Sundays consider myself a creative. or a content creator, because I was all corporate, you know, spreadsheets, reports, presentations, that kind of thing. That was my life, you know. But then to know I've written a book, I produced a podcast the past 4 years, I write content, I write articles, all of which are creative.
That's
you know,
right.
and so we don't realize that it was always there, but we just given ourselves the opportunity to tap into it.
Yeah.
So I'm loving this conversation. So Ronke, so what do you think has been unique for you at pivoting, or you pivoted pivoted in midlife or mid-career, the kind of challenges or opportunities it presented to you?
Sorry, say the question again.
Sorry, what do you think is unique about making a pivot mid-career or midlife pivot?
Well, what is unique about that? I suppose for everyone, it is so different, isn't it? And for me, I think the biggest piece was around that permission to step into the unknown. And to, in a sense, and I appreciate that I had the luxury of my husband's support, and I definitely don't want to downplay that, but there was something around choosing to explore just whatever was possible, because a number of people had said to me, right, but why don't you just move into a different area of the law, right? This is quite dramatic. You're in civil litigation. There's so many other areas of law that you could look into. And I did consider that initially. And I started to have conversations around maybe looking into corporate work, more corporate law. And what I started to discover was the same amount of energy that I needed to move from one area of law to another area of law was the same amount of energy that I needed to move into anything. And so it really was just choosing to explore what was possible. It was through conversations with people who knew me well. I sat with some mentors and asked for their feedback and asked, what do you know to be a strength of mine that perhaps I'm not seeing? What is it about how I show up that you appreciate, that you potentially think could be a thing that maybe I'm not really valuing? I conversations, honestly, with my hairdresser, who started to talk about how she liked listening to my voice. My neighbor started to say something about when I led a discussion, it made her want to lean in. And so I started to notice more and more these signs, so to speak, that perhaps I hadn't ever really paid attention to. And when I started to connect those dots and look at my own personal circumstances, I mean, iVerbalize was born because at the time I thought young people need more spaces to speak up, full stop. There are not enough spaces for young people to speak up, share their stories and be affirmed, encouraged, celebrated. And so that's where we started. So even though my work is very firmly focused on women now, young people, and that need for that encouragement is still very much on my radar, because that was the catalyst for really stepping into this work.
Excellent. Fabulous. So what do you think you wish you had known before you embarked on this particular this aspect of the journey?
So top of mind for me, I wish I'd known that I didn't have to try and figure it out by myself.
Oh my gosh, yes. Or have it figured out at all.
But even just figuring it out on my own, this solo journey of, I'm now in a completely new space. Perhaps there are other people like me who can journey along with me. And I suppose once I got the feedback from the mentors and I'd taken their advice, so to speak, I kind of then felt like it was now down to me to make it work. And so when people ask me, how long have I been running iVerbalize? I say on paper about 5 years. I say, but really and truly, probably just 1 or 2 years. Because it's in the last couple of years I discovered the power of connection with others, collaboration, networking, conversations that leads to opportunities of this synergy of learning from and giving to others. And there's so much of that I wish I had known at the onset of my journey that would have made it easier in a sense.
Yeah.
And I suppose on some levels would have enabled me to move ahead more quickly.
Yeah. You know, you remind me of that, because one of the things I maybe often tell my clients is that you're not that special. And it almost takes them a step back. And I mean, I mean, you know, exactly like, you know, clutch the pearls. Sure. But more in the fact that we often have what I call a me, myself, and I mentality. So nobody else can experience as experienced, or nobody else is going through what I've gone through. Nobody else can know, you know, all those things we tell ourselves. But invariably, if you tap the shoulder of the woman next to you and you say, look, I've had this experience, whatever it is, you know, one or two out of the three or whatever are going to say to you, well, actually, I went through that and this is how I overcame it. So all that piece you talk about, you know, not making that journey on your own, talking to somebody, you know, getting feedback, you know, look, asking is free. You know, if you don't, and all they can say to you when you ask is no, and you're no worse than when you started off in the first place.
Definitely.
You know, so I'm a big advocate for just going out there, you know, any fear I had about what will they think? Oh, that's gone. Who cares what they think? Right.
Yeah. And I wonder if it's always the fear of what others think, or whether it's even for us, just that sense that it's got to be down to us somehow, that we have got to figure out all of the answers on our own. It's strange.
I think it's a combination of it, you know, talking from a Black woman perspective, you know, the fact is that we are always the one, 99.9 whatever it is percent recurring, are usually the one that shoulders the responsibility of, you know, when people looking for things to happen, or your family, they come to you. I know for me, I was always a pivotal point, being the eldest, or you're in control, you're in charge, you must know. So you have that expectation as to I should know what I'm doing.
You
know, I've always known what I'm doing. I've made the right decision, especially we've been successful. You know, we know we knew what we got. We were successful, so we must know what we've been doing.
Indeed.
You know, but it's okay not to know.
Yeah, it's okay not to know. Absolutely.
It's okay not to know. So you touched on, Ronke, failure. You touched on failure. So, but how has failure made a positive difference in your life?
It's so funny, because for a long time, that word genuinely would give me a bit of a, oh my gosh, shall we go there? Must we go there? Let's pretend that it's not quite happened to you. And the very first encounter, I suppose, that I had with failure was when I took my master's in international environmental law at the London School of Economics. I'd just finished my first degree. I got a 2-1. I'd won an award for best student. I really was on, you know, on cloud nine, really excited. And then I went through the master's and I failed. So I failed 2 of the modules, and that meant that I needed to do the whole thing all over again. I thought my life was coming to an end. And I mean that. I had never experienced failure, especially academically, ever. My parents had sacrificed a lot to fund my studying here. There was a lot of expectation and hopes about my performance. And so it really, really shook me. I was so discouraged by the fact that I'd failed and couldn't quite see life in the same way beyond this failure. And I'm so grateful to my parents, because where I thought that their disappointment would be sky high, they were incredibly supportive and gave me that fuel that said, let's do this again. It's okay. We will do this. I recently found some of the letters they wrote to me during that period. I kept them because it really meant a lot. Their support
Yeah.
was incredible in terms of just that belief that I could do it again. And I did it, and I passed, and I didn't die, and life has continued. And what I say often, because I talk about it a lot now when I speak, because for a long time I didn't. I wanted to put it in this box, this black box with a big padlock, put it under the bed, never to be spoken about.
Yeah.
And yet it has taught me, for starters, that that is life. That is just part and parcel of life, and that we can recover from failure, and that there are lessons that we learn that we can't learn through any other experience, and that it connects us with others who have gone through similar experiences. And I remember speaking to a friend soon after that, actually, and she just failed her driving test. I think it was for about the 6th attempt, and she was so
I won't even go there, but never mind. I can relate.
Yes, and I remember sharing with her about my failure, and she looked at me stunned, genuinely. She was like, I would never have thought that about you. And I said, well, I choose to share it. And the irony is that now I go back to the London School of Economics and I speak to students there, and I share it as part of my journey, as a part of my story. So what was something that I wanted to hide has actually become a gift that I use now when I speak, because failure is part and parcel of life, and it's part of our growth journey. And so that was the very first encounter. And of course, that has happened again at different times. And yet I choose to see it through a very different lens. And we've heard different acronyms for what it means. Genuinely, for me, it means another opportunity to try again.
Excellent.
That's what it is.
Excellent. It's funny you mentioned the driving test, because I have never told anybody how many times I took my driving test, not even my husband, and we've been together 18 years, and he will never know. All you need to know is that I now have a license, right, that I've held successfully for many, 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 many years. And that's all that needs to be said. I learned every time from it. About perseverance. For me, that was all about perseverance, because gosh knows it was frustrating, right?
Indeed. So you're going to go and tell him tonight then how many?
Right. Nobody has ever known how many times I took that test. It's not something I care to share, but I definitely learn from. So, Ronke, we're coming down to our last few questions, and I wish we could talk here for ages, but I know we have a deadline. So, talk to me about what advice do you wish you'd given to your 20-year-old self?
Let me remind myself where I was, my 20-year-old self. I probably just experienced the failure. I suppose I would say to her that everything that I need, I already have. That the gifts that I've been blessed with by God are worthy, and that there is space for them, and that I will find, or my people will find me. And so to show up fully, to keep laughing out loudly, to keep taking up, or to choose to take up space, and to not be afraid. And I say laugh loudly intentionally, because there was an instance once where I was laughing really loudly, because that's who I am. That's how I am. And somebody looked at me almost with a look of disdain, like, what's so funny? And in that moment, there was almost a temptation to tone it down a little bit. Okay, must you be so loud when you laugh? Must you? And I'm so grateful that I chose to keep laughing out loud and to keep showing up as me. And so that's what I would say to her, that it will all come together, and that there's so much that the world has got to offer, so many adventures, and to not be afraid, to keep putting one foot in front of another, because it's
Excellent.
all worth it.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. And just to, I suppose, expand on something you talked about earlier, you talked about mentors and stuff like that. So, you know, if you could choose your own mentor, doesn't matter dead or alive or whatever, who would it be and why?
The person who comes to mind, and it's funny because I was thinking about her, so I went running this morning and thinking about who would I really love to meet. So apart from my mother, who I love, and
yeah, exactly, yeah, that's a given. Yeah, that's it.
Yes.
Yeah,
it would be Michelle Obama.
Okay, she's
it
a popular
would be
choice.
Michelle.
Her and
She is,
Oprah.
I'm sure she is. I did think of Oprah as well, but Michelle used to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
Michelle is very honest about just being a regular woman, regular girl, who had a vision though, and who worked hard, who was committed, and who just by putting that one foot ahead of another, making those wise decisions, those wise choices, has gone on to inspire so many. And what I love about her is that she shows up as I know we use that word authentic a lot, but she does. She shows up as herself. Michelle does strike me as somebody who could be on your podcast, Janice.
Yeah.
Somebody who I could
out there.
I'm putting out there for you and for myself.
Yeah.
Somebody who I could have a coffee with and laugh about life and dream about the future and have a sense of really making a difference and having a legacy in this world that impacts on the future lives of girls.
I totally know what you mean, because in my head, Michelle has always been my sister friend, you know, because and one of the things was what I always remember is that she released her book Becoming exactly the same day I released my book. And I was like, come on, girl, you could have given me a chance. There was, you know, come on, there was no competition here. I remember actually recording going, make me a bestseller like Michelle. I actually recorded the video to do that. Still working on it, but, you know, but I totally get what you mean. And we're about the same age, you know, similar upbringings, apart from the lawyer bit, but, you know, so I've had that synergy. My little in my head, she's my sister friend.
I love it.
So Ronke, what are the three things have you learned about yourself during your career?
So my legal career coming into
whatever you choose, your whole career, what three things have you learned about yourself?
Okay, so the very first one is that when I'm operating from a place that is completely aligned to my values, that's when I show up the best, genuinely. And there's a whole story to that, but I was pitching for some work where normally I try and just show up very professionally, thinking that's what was needed. I led by starting off sharing who I am and mentioning joy as being one of my greatest values and thinking, oh my gosh, they might think it's a bit, you know, possibly childish. Who needs joy when we have serious business to be moving along with? And yet it was really that I believe made the difference and got me through the door for that opportunity. So that alignment, showing up fully from a place of this is me, and you can run with me and enjoy my company, or you can decide that I'm not quite what you are looking for. So that would be the very first thing. The second thing would be that I'm more courageous than I think I am. And it's more when friends and people around me reflects that back to me, because I've just done what I have thought to do. I'll just try it, and I'll try that. And genuinely that one foot in front of another is what has enabled me to get to this place. It's not been huge jumps off mountaintops. It's not been, you know, big ski slopes going down. It's been that steady stepping day by day by day from a place of courage, from a place of choosing to try and put myself out there. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't work, then at least I tried. And finally, I suppose that the power of community is so precious. And I feel gratitude is definitely one of my greatest values. And I feel very grateful for the community that I have in my personal space, the community that I've built through the work that I do, the communities that I've been privileged to become a part of, and that there is such beauty, power, and magic in just being part of and creating communities.
Excellent, excellent. I love those responses. Love those three things. So in the last official interview question, Ronke, what does success feel like to you?
And I love that you said feel and not look. Last night I was doing some work around what does it look like? Somebody had asked me some questions around that. Didn't even know this was coming. So success feels like a deep sense of joy, overflowing joy, a joy that leaks, a joy that invites others to enjoy as well. Success feels like a depth of gratitude that isn't easily taken away, irrespective of what's going on around me, but being able to look at my life and just, be full of gratitude. As I mentioned, or I don't know if I mentioned, I am a Christian and my faith is a huge part of my life. And there's a verse that comes to mind that I say often, and it says very simply, "Here I raise my Ebenezer, thus far have you brought me." And that sense of looking back at my life and thinking, wow, you have brought me to this very spacious place. And I feel really, really grateful. So success feels like that. And success feels like, finally, something about empowering. I've discovered recently the legacy is really important to me. And it was a feeling I felt in a coaching session that really surprised me. And it's about being connected to a purpose much bigger than me. That really just is expansive and that gives others permission to show up beautifully as themselves, because each of us is worthy. Our stories are, our voices are, our very presence is. And so it feels very empowering, very inviting, joyous and grateful.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Thank you. And I could see you feeling that as you closed your eyes when you were visualizing it. So I know it came from the heart. So Ronke, that was my last official question. But if people would like to connect with you and know more about what you do, how can they do that?
So LinkedIn is where I show up the most. So please find me on LinkedIn, Ronke Kokoruwe on LinkedIn. I also have a website, www.iverbalize.co.uk. It needs some updating, so watch that space. I also send out, it used to be a weekly newsletter, which has gone a little bit quiet and needs some revamping. And so those would be the main places where I can.
Excellent. I'll be sure to put the links in the show notes.
Yes.
But you are now out of the hot seat, Ronke. So thank you so much for being my guest this week on This Woman Can.
Thank you, Janice. Genuinely so delighted to have connected with you and to have had the privilege of sharing this time and space with you. So thank you.
Thank you again.